You want to hear about my time going into McDonald's recently?
Um, I'm curious about that because I've known you as a not lifelong, but for the last at least decade, a vegetarian. So I'm curious as to why you even went to a McDonald's.
Well, you know what they say, new year, new me. And, you change things up, keep things spicy, man. But I went up to the counter and the cashier asked what I wanted. Do you want to hear what I told him?
What'd you tell him?
I told him that I want it all.
You want it all. Well, that's interesting. You want to hear the one about the time I got trapped at a Dillard's?
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi. Actually, scrap that. On all sides of the Mississippi. And this podcast is called Hey, Listen to This, and it is hosted by two dashingly good looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I am the only. I am the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the often disputed Matthew James Durzik. And what we do here on Hey Listen to This is week by week, most weeks, we dig into the album of choice, which is either by me or Ryan. We go through track by track and figure out what we like, what we don't like. We discuss it with each other, find out what we agree on, what we disagree on. And last time out, it was my selection, and I'm trying to remember. It was Graceland. We did Graceland by Paul Simon from 1986, and a bit of an interesting review that we did because it felt like there was a lot of stuff we agreed on, but at the same time, there was that one little itch that separated your thoughts on the record from mine.
Yeah, and so that main thing that just separated my thoughts from yours was just Paul Simon himself in terms of his vocal delivery, and at some points I didn't mind it in some tracks, but in other tracks it really was a little bit overbearing of an experience for me to sit through. But overall, the I had fun doing the review, like I always do with you. It's always a good time, man. So, this week we are pivoting over to a band that you and I have seen multiple times live at this point, and most recently, like within this past week, actually only a couple days ago at this rate. And that band is called Foxing. And so, for those of you who are like, Ryan, what is a foxing? I mean, I don't blame you. Like, unless you know, you know. But if you don't know, let me explain. So, Foxing is they are a emo slash indie music group that really kind of blew up in the early 2010s, and they began in 2011 following the end of the group Hunter Gatherer. That group was a post rock band active from 2008 to 2010 that featured members of the band that formed Foxing. More on the instrumental front, the lead singer of Foxing, Connor Murphy, he was the basis of the emo group called Family Right, and then he was also a vocalist for an indie slash post rock band called Torchlight Red. So keeping those two influences in mind, like it kind of does paint the scene for what Foxing does bring to the table, musically, at least like starting out of the gate, because they've released up into this point of this recording, they've released one, two, three, four, five albums. In one, their most recent album is their self-titled album that was released this past year. And so they came out of the gate in 2013 with the album The Albatross. Then 2015 they came out with Dealer. 2018 they came out with Near My God, which is the album that we're talking about today. And in 2021 they came out with Draw Down the Moon. And then, like I said, this past year, only about like a couple months ago, they released their self-titled um, album, and that was actually their first album without the backing of their record label. So, like, from this point on with Foxing, like, everything that they do is 100% independent. So, like, I really admire the group for that. And, my experience with the group as a whole, I discovered them thanks to, one week they popped up on my Spotify Discover Weekly, and I thought that they were a really cool band. I think, if I'm not mistaken, a track from this album that we're covering today was on that playlist, and they kind of cycled out of rotation. And then when I heard wind about them, gearing up to release the album Draw Down the Moon in 2021, I was just like, oh, hey, I remember that band. They came across my radar at one point. Let me actually start listening to some singles, and I really, really did love what they were bringing to the table and, like, into preparation for that album release. And then whenever during that time I was digging into the back catalog, really got into, like, a couple other albums, the one that we're talking about today, the Albatross. Dealer is still, like, a little bit of a hard get for me to appreciate. But what really sold me on this group, though, is when we started to see them live. They really put on a really solid performance, and they all, like I told you, man, like, when we walked away from the most recent show here in Pittsburgh, like, they just seem like such genuine dudes, and they're a very unique band. So, like, again, this is probably gonna be one of those episodes where it's more of us really just kind of diving into, like, the hey, listen to this core, where it's just like we're really just going to a niche of what one of us really appreciates. But, I'm here for it. I'm excited.
I am too, and realistically, pretty much anything I know about this band has come from you and your dedication to them over these last few years. Because, this band, it's weird, because I've seen them live probably more than any live act I've ever seen because of you, and yet it really wasn't up until this last show that you mentioned, the one they did at Mr. Small's, that I really came away from it thinking, all right, I really enjoy what I listened to. Not that I didn't enjoy the first two shows, but those ones were just kind of like, okay, I like them. They're all right. But this one was like, ooh, no, I'm kind of, getting something here, and I think maybe it was just timing. Maybe there was the fact that I was able to walk out of the building without my ears ringing and thinking, crap, I forgot my earplugs again. But whatever it was just a very pleasant experience to hear Foxing live. Now, this is not that today. This album, Near My God, is a studio album from 2018 that we're going to dive into and talk about how they sound on record, and I say we get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I will go ahead and kick us off with the opening track, Grand Paradise. Oh my goodness, this song is just absolutely amazing. Like, I'm coming out right out of the gate, like, guns blazing. Like, I absolutely love the song. Like, that, like, right from the start of it, like, you get that repetitive rhythm that just sticks throughout the whole entirety of the track, and, like, it makes me visualize, like, somebody just going downstairs and, like, sinking deeper and deeper and deeper, just a gradual, like, descent down. And also, just alongside that repetitive rhythm, like, the instrumental work with the piano, guitar, and the hand claps, oh my, like, that adds a great texture as well. And yeah, like, you get, like, the vocals at the beginning, which, kicks off the whole record with singing I Can Be Romantic When I'm Starving for Sleep. Like, that kind of traditional, like, emo, indie kind of rock thing. Then, in the second verse, Oh my goodness. Like it kicks the album's like the track's momentum up to a whole other level with the one of my favorite lyrics that I've heard recently, and that lyric is I'm shock collared at the gates of heaven. And you even think about that lyric for a second, you're at the gates of heaven, about to approach something very pleasurable, but then you just can't. Like, just something's holding you back. And, that's an absolutely beautiful sentiment. And another line that I like is just when he's talking about hair from the dog, I've got a fistful of its mane. And, you hear about the old adage of, you gotta have a bit of the hair of the dog that bit you, and for Connor Murphy to basically be like, hey, just that hair is not enough. You got a fistful of its mane, you're just trying to suck it down and try to power through. Is another great line. And dude, also one of my favorite moments. I've said a lot of favorite moments so far within this track here, but throughout this whole record is just whenever in that second chorus where you get that crescendo where he's talking palms kept white hot gold rings fold like a knot tied sweater tight love sleep take me now. I just the way that it sounds, it's pure bliss to me. And also, speaking about pure bliss, the way that, in that second chorus where the vocals are sounding, where it just seems like they're sliding down into phrases, I absolutely love that, man. This song is an absolute treat for me from head to toe. And, I mean, do I need to say it? This is my favorite song on the album. We're coming out of the gate, absolutely on the best possible note.
It's funny you say that because it's not my favorite song on the album. I don't quite like it as much as you do, but I do have it in my top 3 at number 3. For a lot of the reasons that you were talking about, particularly the groove at the start of the song, so solid, very much a sort of very funky type of indie rock groove that really does just nail things down right away. And then, like you said, 100 seconds into the song, bang, it goes into a full rock explosion. And then the lyrics that you're talking about, I thought they were really great lyrics about anxiety because, like you say, getting shot collared at the gates of heaven, a fistful of the dog's own mane. This is basically a song about a guy stuck, whether he's the one making himself stuck or life just has him stuck in his tracks. It works off, very, very well. And again, have the dog metaphor scattered throughout and a lot of issues with, trying to break free of whatever it is that you're kind of stuck in. There are 2 songs I think are better, but this one does get the record off to a very good start. And I was kind of wondering, because there were a few other songs I could have put at the 3 spot, but this one, especially because of the subject matter that it deals with, like you say, with just sort of struggling with yourself and trying to achieve that top thing, whether it's heaven or paradise, and you're just right there, but you can't quite get it. I relate with that a lot. So yeah, 3rd favorite song on the album for me right out of the gate with Grand Paradise.
I'm glad that we agree on that, because whenever you're oh, I'm kind of when I said that this was my favorite song on the album, you kind of were oh, really? And because I'm oh, don't say this is your least favorite, because we the admiration that I have for this track here, I put it up there with one of my favorite songs of all time. It is just that good to my ears. And even diving into the lyrics, maybe just a little bit of a hair more, talking about the how this track is centered around a guy dealing with anxiety. I would even say it's borderline suicidal, where he's being very degrading to himself. In the middle of the track, you get lyrics saying, I should see myself out, lay me down in the tub, throw away my phone, strap a muzzle to my mouth now. oh my goodness, like the it's at a like the lyrics here are portraying a man who's at the lowest point in his mental health, and like it sounds so good. And for me to dive into the lyrics like that, it even adds another texture to it. On top of that, one other note I want to make about this song, and then we can move on to Slapstick. It's just the screams at the end works so well to cap off such an amazing experience for me. But yeah, Grand Paradise. If this is your very first introduction to the band, if this is your very first song that you listen to by Foxing, you are heading in the right direction.
Yes, and before we go on to Slapstick, I did mention that this was in my top three, and you obviously have it at number one. I have it at number three. For this record, I have a top three and a bottom two.
I have a top three and a bottom one.
Bottom one. Okay. All right. So with that in tow, we will move on to Slapstick. And once again, we have a track that definitely is defined by its dynamics. That is something I noticed throughout the entire record. The way that the band is able to sort of, start soft, but not necessarily, thin. They steep themselves in a mode before going into the big sound. And again, really, really effective on this track. And just like Grand Paradise 2, the second chorus, or the second part of the song, is better than the first. It definitely gets into a stronger groove and a bit of a more focused ideology. Ultimately, though, I thought the song was okay. It didn't land in my top three, nowhere near it, honestly. It's got a solid hook, it's got okay lyrics, but it didn't quite hit me in the same way that Grand Paradise did. And as far as the subject matter of the song, I'll let you handle the majority of that. But yeah, this song was fine, but not really a standout for me.
Oh, all right, cool. I was hoping that you picked up on the subject material because, like, before, doing the review here, I didn't know what this song was specifically about. But thanks to, a resource that both you and I use for reviews here, Genius.com, I discovered that this song is basically about Donald Trump. And I that added a whole new layer, a whole new context, a whole new, I mean, not to get too political, but a whole new appreciation for this track here. And the only lyric I'm gonna highlight here that really kind of pinpoints this as being like a Donald Trump kind of track is "Hold up in a tower, sucking inheritance. So mock up a 30-second TV corroborative defamation." You can dive more into the lyrics if you want to, but there's countless amounts of stabs and pokes at Donald Trump and how he how he became who he is today. Gotta steer away from political talk because this is not a political podcast, but getting into the song's context here. One thing that I love how the group could have went more pedal to the metal, especially coming out of Grand Paradise. But the contrast with Slapstick, like you mentioned, it's really good, at least coming right out of the gate. You get that guitar lick that is featured in the opening, and for me, it comes across so focused, and I really did appreciate that. Especially, I mean, it's almost like them showing some sort of restraint, but that combination of restraint and focus, and with it being such a captivating lick, really got me going. And just the way that you mentioned how the song built, it built so well. That bridge works well, and I love how it's echoed in the last verse. You get the example here. There's no more sun and no more light shine through. And in the last verse, you get call and response dynamic. Would you hold open the door so I can fall in? And underneath that, you get the no more sun, no more light shine through. That's a really good moment in the song. And yeah, just overall though, I really do like this song. It could have crept in to my top three, but it's still it was a song that I didn't really appreciate nearly as much as Grand Paradise before the review, but since doing the review here, like it's been a pleasure like dissecting it. So like, it's a great song nonetheless.
It's a solid song. And only a couple other notes I'm going to have on it is the fact that, number one, I had not realized that it was about specifically Donald Trump, because realistically, lyrics like the ones you mentioned about, the whole 30-second advertisement thing, like that could just be sort of a general idea towards, the facade of the media and everything. Not that I'm trying to defend that man, I'm just saying that those lyrics could be created for a general thought. That being said, the fact that it is about him does make me disappointed that the song is called Slapstick and not rather Clownstick. People don't forget.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to the next track here, Lich Prince. So here we get like another kind of change up, but like it's not as stark as going from Grand Paradise down to Slapstick. Like it's almost like more of a grand statement, especially with how the track opens up with Connor Murphy. How the vocals are produced, where he's saying "glued up," "I feel so isolated," "I feel desperate," "I could wake up." Like those vocals were recorded so bare. It really caught my ear, and it's here that we start to really get into the sound of Foxing as a group, like what they genuinely bring to the table, and it's a great experience. I will say overall, this track is a step down from the past two tracks. Still really do appreciate the track nonetheless. The vocals and organ work well at the beginning. Like I said, I love how it's produced, how it sets up the song, and just I love the line where he's singing, "I've been thinking of new ways to fuck with old friends." Like that's such a great line. And then this, like, one thing that did take away from the experience for me is that I feel like the group in this track here rides the line, "I just want real love for you," just a little bit too much. Like it's legitimately like probably like half of the lyrics in the track here. Nonetheless, the second verse where he's talking about been thinking of new ways to take old drugs, been thinking of shortcuts to dead ends. We get more lyrics about anxiety and more kind of desperate mindset lyrics, especially with the lyrics like "been thinking of new ways to take old drugs." Like that's a great line there. And what does bring up the song from being maybe potentially like another bottom song here for me is the bridge builds up the song very well, and it lands the song into a guitar solo that wraps up everything pretty nicely. Overall, though, Lich Prince it's a great song. Not as I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as the previous two tracks, but I had a good time.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you a little bit. I don't think Lich Prince is a step down from Slapstick. I think it's a step up slightly. It's not my top three, but it did get better on the second listen for me. Because I do agree the lyrics about being sort of a screwed up person and just trying to, kind of in the same way as Grand Paradise, get yourself out of the rut, or in this case, embrace the rut that you're in, by finding ways to, make the old new. I thought those were really good. And I think the singing at the beginning of the track really matches that confessional tone. I agree, the guitar solo is awesome. The one part that did get me, though, was the singing, particularly on the chorus. I don't think the chorus was repetitive per se. I didn't mind them singing, "I just want real love for you" over and over again. But the way it sounds did kind of get to me, because a lot of times we've talked about the way, particularly on albums you've had reservations on the singing of, particularly the last one we did, plus Born to Run, plus Ricky Lee Jones, that sometimes the way someone sings might just sort of throw you off a little bit. That kind of happened here with me because it feels like the chorus goes sort of halfway between trying to hit the melody and trying to be raw and confessional. Because sometimes people just, sing their guts out without trying to hit the melody to prove a point. Other times they hit it right on the note to prove a point that they're a good singer. Here it feels like it's a halfway point. It doesn't feel quite so blended as much as it is compromised. Now, like I said, it did sound better on the second listen, but I felt like if you're going for the wailing of pain of I'm screwed up and I don't know what to do, you got to sort of commit to that instead of just sort of go halfway between, hey, I'm a lead singer and hey, I'm a horrible person. Which route do I go in? It didn't ruin the song for me. I still think it's a really good song. Could have cracked my top 3, but just kind of missed out on it. But yeah, Lich Prince, solid track.
I am right there with you in terms of just like sometimes the vocal delivery being a little bit off-putting at times. Like, I think that's why I kind of maybe am like what holds this band back from being like a favorite band for me. Like, I really do appreciate them a lot, and whenever they come into town, I really do want to like take the time to go see them, especially considering now that they're out of their record label. And like, if I'm not mistaken, the first review that I saw of this group was through the Needle Drop, and he was actually talking about the album Dealer, and he actually took issue with how Connor Murphy was sounding on the vocals. So like, it's not a out of place criticism, and it's one that I could totally understand. And like, I will also just say that I do like another moment here, especially at the end where he's talking about like, I feel like a house plant for you. And what that's basically saying is, hey, like, it's almost like a passive kind of love where like, hey, you're just sitting in a corner and you get watered, and like that's basically it. Like, you get some sunlight, but there's not actually like a whole lot of nurturing and partnership taken along. But yeah, like it it's not a often in this podcast here we talk like, well, especially like on my end, where I talk about like the Weekend effect, where like there could be like repetitive lyrics, but you don't notice it because the band and the artist does do a good job changing up the instrumentation or just making it an overall pleasant experience. Like, I think that like the group doesn't do enough in the chorus here to really like make it a worthwhile experience. They don't tap into that Weekend effect. But yeah, anything else to talk? Any other notes on Lynch, Prince before we move on to Game Shark?
Just that it's not going to be the worst chorus we discuss on this record.
Okay, I'm excited, man.
But I am ready to move on to the next track, which is Game Shark, and I'll take the lead on this one. And I'll start with the positives. It starts with a nice kind of sort of I wouldn't say techno, but very mechanical groove, sort of very reminiscent of Nine Inch Nails, before it shifts into a bit more of a latter stage Radiohead type of groove, very sort of almost jazzy or funky, whatever you want to coin as far as indie rock. And ladies and gentlemen, that is where my compliments on this track end, because this is my least favorite song on the record. And what sinks this down so hard for me are the lyrics. And I've talked about this a lot recently. Songs that are so disjointed lyrically that they have to have like, there's like 9,000 metaphors and they all mean different things. And the only people who know it are the people who wrote it. And I'm not saying every song has to be as basic as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or, something like that. It doesn't. You can have meaning, you can have sort of little inscriptions in the song, but man, the lyrics on this track are so all over the place, and so I don't even know what the hell he's talking about. And what doesn't help it is the fact that because the lyrics are so confused, whenever he sings with the swell of, presenting this as like, this is what I mean it from my heart. It's like, the voice is too cocky for lyrics that are this confused. And one other thing I did not like about the track is how it ends. The last bit of this track is just pure existence. Like, it's just sort of a meandering, like, synth tone that's just like, I didn't appreciate that either. So yeah, this track easily my least favorite on this album.
Wow. You're breaking my heart, man. But I will say, like, this is not in my top three. It's not my bottom track though. Whenever we get to when we get to the bottom track, obviously we'll talk about it. Man. I think I'll discuss, like, my favorite moment lyrically here, because, like, your main thing was the disconnectedness of the lyrics. And I can't really, I didn't really, like, take the time to draw all the lyrics together into a cohesive message. So I can't tell you what the song is really about. I think it's just a man dealing with his demons and, like, coming close to death. And that is exemplified with the line that I want to highlight. And it's towards the end of the track here. And the lyric goes, the band played Nearer My God to Thee. Death was begging for your company. So, like, you think about the song Nearer My God to Thee, which is, like, your a traditional, like, church hymn, and it's basically, like, from what I understand, it's about, like, somebody getting closer to God, getting closer to death, and, for that to be complemented with the lyric, death was begging for your company, like, death is basically right around your door, and, like, even before that set of lyrics is, that set of lyrics, you got a set of lyrics saying, stumbled drunk out on the balcony, saw the moonlight in the concrete. Like, somebody drinking, somebody down on their luck, thinking about, like, saw the moonlight in the concrete. And it's just a very dark kind of experience. And, like, even outside of the lyrical standpoint, like, what I really, really did appreciate about this track here is just how up-tempo and in your face it is. Like, that fuzzy bass line at the beginning, oh my goodness. Like, I really did like that. And just the groove that the song establishes just locks you in. And I'm here for it 10 times out of 10. The soaring vocals at the end of the choruses here land so well for me. And, like, the background vocals work on different levels, and I really did like what they were bringing to the table. I can understand your criticism about the lyrics, which is interesting because, like, typically I'm more of the lyric head. Well, typically I'm a lyric head here, but, I think I was just kind of sucked into just the overall experience of the song, how, like, basically just took me by the chest and just, dragged me through the streets.
It's funny too because, like I said at the top, musically I like this track. Like, it sounds good. And I think, again, I sort of had the same issues I had with Bon Iver's Award Season. I thought that track sounded great too, but I just thought the lyrics were a little bit too, I know something you don't know type of just spattered throughout the song. And this is one of those songs, again, I hate to break your heart, but I've said this before about many a track, is that if you're not paying attention, it sounds really good.
It's one of my favorite backhanded, like, compliments that you present in our show. If you're not paying attention, it's pretty good. Like, if you don't taste the sandwich, it actually tastes pretty good.
Pretty much. Yeah. If you don't know what's in the sandwich, and just don't think about that, it's fine.
Yeah. All right, so I'm ready to move on to Nearer My God. Are you?
I am indeed.
So, this is another big song on the record here. And right out of the gate, we get that very church-like pronounced vocals that we heard earlier in the album with the track Lynch Prince. And I love how this track opens up with like just a very pronounced statement. I want it all. I'll watch the bridges all burn, and I'll be your dog. Like the way that that's produced so cleanly, and just with such a direct message. I'm here for it 10 times out of 10. And just the little guitar licks that you hear in the background and the strumming adds such a great texture to what almost feels like a church hymn within its own right. And then also progressing further into the song does die down at the end of the bridge, adding a nice contrast. But then everything kind of just goes right back into the groove of the song. A line that really did hit me, man, though, is unfollowing my dead friends. Like, um, like I've come across experiences at least on my social media, on Facebook and such, where I have friends who've since passed away, but their accounts are still active, and I'm like, okay, this feels kind of awkward, even looking at this, but you can't unfollow them. So it just that set of lyrics really kind of hit me personally. Overall, though, I really do like this song quite a bit, especially with the repetitive question of do you want me at all? And we hear this throughout several instances in the album where Connor Murphy's talking about wanting real love, seeking real love, questioning real love, like and this is such a great song. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. And another moment I will say about this song here, and then I'll kick it over to you, is I like the set of lyrics because I'd sell my soul to be America's pool boy. Like, um, for those of you who are wondering what America's Pool Boy, what that lyric could actually mean, you think about in the 1960s, 70s, the golden age of America, as some people might call it, oh, that stay-at-home mom might see that pool boy and be like, oh yeah, hey, I want a piece of that. Well, that's what Connor Murphy really would want to be, the crown centerfold. I just absolutely love this song 10 times out of 10. It is a perfect song for me. And we've arrived at my second favorite track on the album.
Oddly enough, I have it one spot higher than you. I have it as my favorite track on the LP. And for those of you who didn't see that, we did a high five, but we're doing this via Zoom. Doesn't matter. Anyways, why I like this track so much, and I think a little bit has to do with the fact that we just saw this band live, and this was a song I was like, oh yeah, this song. And hearing it again, I really love the lyrics of this track, like you mentioned. Just sort of this basic ideology of sipping out for someone, wanting to be America's pool boy, being your dog, just wanting it all just so I can, have you, because you are my all. It's a trope that's been in dozens, if not hundreds, of songs in the past, but the way it comes across here is so direct and in your face and just works so well. The groove of this song is fantastic. I like the guitar solo on this one as well. On an initial listen, I wasn't as hot on the vocals, but much like you said with Game Shark, I just got sucked in, and I was like, you know what? No, this song is... It's just really that good. It's just a great, solid, simple rock song. So I do have it at number one with a slight asterisk, and that is that it does indeed sound better live, but we're not reviewing the live stuff, we're reviewing the record. But if you have the chance to hear this band do this song live, do it. It is worth it. It just comes alive at any hall that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And for me, when I was coming up top 3 tracks here to do in this review, I knew that Near My God and Grand Paradise were gonna be 1 and 2, but I didn't know which one was gonna be which. But since in the dissection, Grand Paradise is number 1, Near My God is number 2, but they're both fantastic tracks. Yeah, like not much else to say. I think the reason why I put Grand Paradise at number one, it's a little bit more of a complex listen. This is just more of just a really good time, really good vibes, and just an overall really pleasant experience. So, are you ready to talk about not one cup, not three cups, but five cups?
I am ready to talk about 5 cups, and I am ready to talk about 9 minutes because that's how long the song is. It is by far the longest song on the record, and it is a very. You want to talk about complex listen? This track is the very essence of a complex listen. Because this song, for all intents and purposes, is about dealing with not just the dangers of drinking too much alcohol, i.e., the 5 cups, but also just that feeling you have whenever you're drinking, where you're just trying to desperately, like we've talked about on other tracks, get out of this mud, get yourself out and back to a state of sobriety, back to a state of clarity, back to a state of self-confidence that, quite frankly, being super inebriated does not allow for. And just lines where he's talking about, outside of a Circle K, trying to bum a cigarette off of someone and trying to regain control. Like, here's what makes this track so interesting. It's not my top three, but if we were going based off of vibes, accuracy, whatever the hell you want to call that, this track would be number one because it is a song that sounds like what it is. It is a song that sounds like being drunk and trying to bum a cigarette in a Circle K parking lot. And the music reflects that. It is very murky. It is very disoriented. It is very vibey in all the wrong ways, but in good wrong ways, if that makes sense. It just sounds like a bad time on drugs or alcohol. It reminds me a little bit of a song famous by the Velvet Underground called Heroin. Now, that song was a bit more stripped down because it had to just trying to make a point of doing more with less, and they succeeded, but that's another album for another day. But yeah, just the way this track drags, it just sort of throws itself out there with only the lyrics being the sort of out of the abyss to explain what the hell's going on. It's a really, really effective track, and it's not necessarily something I'm going to seek out listening again, except for, educational purposes, because it's just such a drag to listen to, but it's so effective in what it does, and I respect it for what it is.
I'm right there with you, man. This is another song that could have easily popped into my top three. And when I officially revealed that third favorite, there was one specific moment in there that kind of just popped it over. But you talk about like how this track portrays the mindset of like drinking at night. I took it to another step, like just being very suicidal. And like you said, this song is good for all the wrong reasons. For that, it's just it's a very accurate representation of the mindset and the vibe that people go through whenever they're exploring. Well, not exploring, but they're going through this kind of moment in their life, for lack of a better phrase or better term. And that second verse that you mentioned, where you get the imagery of being outside of the Circle K and like somebody saying, "Hey, get home safe tonight," like that was just really specifically haunting for me as well. And I just love how this song really explores dynamics so well. Like the opening verse has that, like at least getting right out of the gate, the opening verse has that heartbeat with that guitar lick, and accompanied by the haunting vocals, but then everything just moves into a piano and vocal chorus that just builds, where he's just talking about like, I want to drive with my eyes closed. And this is a band effectively kind of riding a repetitive chorus without with adding more to the table without sinking down the value of the track. Like how we saw in Lynch Prince, where It just the vocals there and the chorus, like "I want real love for you," like it wasn't landing nearly as effective as I want to drive with my eyes closed here, because like just the vibes and everything that was bringing to the table was so captivating, and just the bridge, it really explodes the song with the screams of "I won't wait," contrasting that with the spoken word accompaniment of like "I want to keep my eyes closed." And just the idea of like just keeping your eyes closed, like we this is again exploring more suicidal tendencies. And I'm just gonna end off my um discussion of Five Cups here with this line here that really just hit me. When it's cold, I'd like one more taste of a try before I suck up the bath and leave them behind. Like, dude, like, oh my goodness, man. Like, such excellent penmanship by Connor Murphy there. And just overall, like, how the song lingers at the very end. Oh, well, not at the very end, but, like, at the midway point, and just it moves organically into that grim back half where it just everything is just so murky and so depressive. Like, this is I know that this song didn't pop into my top three, but Five Cups is a pure example of the creative genius and just what Foxing really does bring to the table as a collective, because they have experience, like they have that post rock experience, and they also have that emo rock experience, and when those two fuse together, like it is just pure joy, especially in Five Cups here. Instantly a really great track. Could have easily popped into my top three. If I honestly had to rank the tracks here, this would be easily number four for me.
I'm probably. See, I don't know. I feel like I would be right there with you, or at least have this in my top five. Again, it is such an intelligent song. It is such a very well executed song. It is a very accurate song. And the lyrics are probably some of the best on the album. Again, it does what it's meant to. I just don't know if I could, again, outside of it's not a song I so much like as honor and respect what it is, because I don't put this on and then say, oh, I'm enjoying what I'm listening to. I'm not, but I'm not supposed to, which means they're doing it exactly right. It's a very weird song for that reason, but it's like you said, it works so well. Before we continue on to the second half of the record with Heartbeats, Ryan, I got a question for you.
And what's that?
If someone is listening to what it is that we are doing and they like what they are hearing, what is the best way that they can support us?
Give us $5. No, the best way that they can help support us to make sure that we get picked up by the algorithm gods, and the way that they can help ensure that is that on that podcasting platform of choice, if you have the option to do a review for us, make sure that you leave a very positive review. And also make sure that you do whatever action that you need to do to make sure that you stay up to date with our episodes, whether that's a subscribe, whether that's a follow. I don't know what other options there are. But, just make sure that you stay up to date with our episodes. And also, if you're listening to this on the YouTubes, make sure that you like the episode and leave a comment down below what you think about, the episode as a whole and what you guys think about the album. And also, if you want to stay up to date with our posts and, our, content, even on a further step, would be to follow us on social medias. We have Blue Sky, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have Threads. We don't have Twitter / X anymore because I'm tired of getting push notifications for Elon Musk, even though I've never followed the man in my life. But that's for another discussion for another day. And also, if the listener out there wants to do an episode recommendation, the best way that they can do that is hit us up at our email, which is ttheylisten@gmail.com. And also, our tagline for all of our socials is very similar, and that is ttheylisten. So, yep, that is the best way that they can help support us continue on in our podcasting journey.
But if you want to give us $5, we're not going to say no.
Yeah. All right. So, the next track, though, is Heartbeats. And, yeah, the strings kicking everything off, they are a nice touch. Kind of guiding us back into a different phase of the album. Well, maybe not a different phase, but just transitioning us out of such a depressive song as what the previous track, Five Cups, was. One thing that I will say right out of the gate, the drum machine effect on here was a bit of a turnoff for me. It did come across as a bit inorganic. The opening set of lyrics where, you get this dialogue about, they said, come on and get off of the bridge, and can we take the cameras down? That's a solid set, and, you get back into, lyrics about, anxiety and just being very self-aware, the concept about being on a bridge alludes to another hint at suicidal thoughts, and talking about cameras, and it's mainly from the subject of the song, the protagonist of the song suffering from paranoia, where he's just being filmed all the time. And also the chorus is decent here, where the band is singing "You are not in love, so stop playing along," but they do write it just maybe a hair too much. It's too much for me. It's not a bad chorus in its own right, but they don't follow the rule of three, where they don't change it up. They just keep riding it until the cows come home, and those cows are producing sour milk after a while for me. And the line that I did like in the track here was, pull that rat heart out of your chest. It doesn't mean anything to us now. I really did like that line. I don't know specifically if they're what the meaning is behind it, but I did like that. The bridge was cool with the vocal sample saying, your heart beats with us now. But yeah, overall though, this is the bottom of the barrel for me in terms of the tracks here in the album. Only because the drum machine is a bit of a turnoff. This song kind of just goes through different modes that doesn't organically link up, and just the band is writing that chorus, that sign of "you're not in love," a bit too much for my liking. So yeah, this is my least favorite track on the album. It's not a bad track, but still, comparatively, comparing it to the other tracks on the record, this is by far the weakest of the crop.
Yeah, my thoughts on this track are pretty similar to yours, honestly. I will say the lyrics I thought were pretty good. They do have this sort of very snarky bite to them of, dealing with, why shut the cameras off, or let's shut the cameras off, because let's just, try to hide things. I wasn't as turned off by the drum machine as you were, to be completely honest. I didn't even notice it was a drum machine until you mentioned it just now. But I will fully agree with you. The chorus, to me, does not work on this song. Because it's not just how they write it out endlessly, but the way they write it is basically the equivalent of getting on a horse backwards. Because it just, and again, if you want to try, going against the norms of traditional song execution, that's fine. But have a point to it. And it feels like this doesn't. It starts on the wrong upbeat before heading into the one of the chorus, and that just kind of pissed me off. And it just kind of kept going, doing that, trying to like regain the loop throughout the entirety of the song. I didn't really like that either. Um, and yeah, the execution of the whole track does feel very disjointed and kind of like Game Shark cocky in all the wrong places. Like, it sounds like they know exactly what they're doing, but objectively, it feels like they're not. So, yeah, this is my second least favorite track on the album, beat out just barely by Game Shark. I did not dig this track really that much.
I'm glad that we synced up at least with this track here, because like I was curious to see what you were referring to as like the least effective, like the bottom of the barrel of the choruses within the record here. So I'm glad that we synced up with that, because not that I would have had brought out my boxing gloves, because I feel like the only two tracks I would have really brought out my boxing gloves for in terms of like you hating on them were Grand Paradise and Near My God, which we both enjoyed. So that being said, ready to move on to Trapped in the Dilliards.
Yes, I'm ready to go get trapped in the Dillards. And this track is it's definitely a nice refresher from Heartbeats for being sort of the track to get things back on track. It really didn't do that great a job. This feels like the track that Heartbeat should have been. The piano groove that drives this song, I really, really like. It definitely has a bit more of a pop feel to it, or a bit more of a traditional pop feel to it in a sense. The lyrics are solid. Basically, again, just sort of this Dante from Clerks, I'm not even supposed to be here today type of vibes, where it's just like, I'm in a mall and I don't know what I'm doing here, and now I'm running into people I don't want to run into. I'm running into a pregnant ex-lover. Yay, joy, I need to get the hell out of here. And so it's not very... I feel like this song could have had more details about that situation, but it didn't necessarily have to. And on the second listen, I thought, because honestly, my thoughts about the singing and the execution were the same as Heartbeats on the first listen. Second listen, it got better. The only part of this track I really didn't like, and what really kept it out of my top three, was that sort of like unorganized blaring synth that's just sort of sprinkled throughout the track, that just sort of bleeps and bloops in different positions. I thought that was unnecessary. It didn't completely drag the track down for me, but I'm just kind of like, why? What are you doing here? Why are you doing that? So aside from that synth, I did like the song quite a bit. Probably in the top half of my album, because it's just a solid, good album track of a song.
I'm right there with you with the feeling of this track being just a very solid album track. And ironically enough, like, I did like that glitchy synth line that you were talking about. Like, I thought that was a cool moment throughout the track there. And just the song overall, like, I like the way that the piano and the vocals contrast against that glitchy line. It's a good contrast there, and the chorus is good, and I just like how the vocals land on the chorus. Like it's pretty bare, and I don't know, like it bleeds on the edge of just if it was produced in the wrong way, or if like a note was missed, it could have been a little bit unbearable for me. But it just lands in just that sweet spot for me. It's not like heavenly like Near My God was, but it works for me. And another moment that I did like in here is the bridge is pretty solid, and it carries out the song in a good manner. And just that lift that you get after the first chorus into the second verse is a nice texture moment. And lyrically, one of my favorite moments was she's saying she believes in God again, and it feels nice to think that someone's watching from above. And like this we've talked about like suicidal thoughts, anxiety, and like just dealing with life as a whole, being like like, lyrical themes throughout this record here. But there's also, like, a couple moments that we haven't touched on where, like, Connor Murphy's really just kind of diving into religion and just his relationship with God. And maybe, like, that's going to play off a little bit more in the back half of the record. But, like, I just like that moment because, like, the concept of, like, oh, believes in God again. And, like, it's nice to feel like, that someone's watching from above. Like, it's I would almost challenge that person and be like, do you believe in God, or do you just want to have that comfort blanket that, hey, like, life has meaning? Which, as we progress further into the record here, we're going to come across a song that talks about that even further, like, the belief in God as a concept. But, overall, though, this is, again, it's a nice track. Doesn't do enough to really pop it up into, like, the top half of my track rankings, if I'm going to be honest with you. This could have easily been, like, another bottom track for me. But, just due to the added texture that you get into that second verse coming out of that first chorus is a good moment. And just the overall presentation of the song is decent enough for me. I like it.
Before we move on to Bastardizer, if we ever do decide to launch our Patreon account, I know what our first piece of Patreon content has to be, and that is you and me going to the nearest Dillard's, just walking around with a microphone asking people if they believe in God. That has to be a thing. It has to be.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Just like, do you believe in God? Who are you?
All right, so the next track.
Yes, the next track is Bastardizer, and I believe it is your turn to kick things off.
So, yeah. My first note on this track here is Daddy Issues, the song. It's a great song, and I just love the guitar production here. It's sounding very, very nice. And just the lyrical content here again, like it I feel like in this song here Connor Murphy's writing from a place of personal experience, because when he was asked about, like, this song here, according to Genius.com, he was saying, like, oh, hey, this is a song for anybody that has a rotten SOB of a stepdad. And this is exemplified with lyrics like, while she stays home to pick up your tabs, 'cause you're just horny with secret texts from other names in your old phone by the picture frames. Like, the imagery of, like, being by the picture frames, which is just, like, holding pictures of your family in that house, but, like, you have that phone where, you're seeking out, an affair. Like, I thought that was an excellent, like, that does exemplify, like, Daddy Issues the song for me. But it also just portrays just how, like, some scummy man, how scum of the earth, like, some guys can actually be. And just that accompanied alongside the chorus of Connor Murphy singing, and you think I must not remember, which all this transpired probably when Connor was a kid. Or the subject of the song was a kid. I don't want to, like, portray that Connor Murphy's literally writing this about his own personal experience, but, could be not. But also, like, when we get into the second verse where he's talking about, here lies the magician, survived by applause, but still can't listen. Like, the magician, somebody who disappears, survived by applause, like, oh, hey, you're a good person, blah, 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 but you still can't listen, really can't hear the good things that people are saying about in his life. And, like, you also get that, like, after that, you get the lyrics, the bastardizer, the patron saint of disconnection, of feel no shame. You leave a son who has your name. When you're finally gone, he'll be okay. Like, oh my goodness, man! Like, that is stabbing, that parental father figure with like word knife jujitsu. That's probably a very sloppy execution of like that's essentially a very damning set of lyrics. I really did like that moment in the song pretty well. And just overall though, like it is a good song. I probably could have rated this song a little bit better in my initial review here, but overall great song.
I do agree with you that it's a great song, and I do have it rated higher. This is my final entry into the top three. I have it at number two. For a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, I dug the groove on this track. It's fantastic. And really, the best singing on this album up to this point, honestly. It doesn't sort of reach for that high register that comes with mixed results on a lot of other tracks. Like, he's just saying low and from the heart on this one. I really did like that a lot. And I agree, the lyrics about this sort of dealing with this scummy guy are, really just on point. And what really pushed this over the top for me was the lyrical twist that takes place on the chorus, where he's basically saying, "Oh, I must not remember that." He's basically saying, "Oh, you think I forgot about all those things? You think I forgot about all those stupid things that you did to ruin our family?" And then when it sort of shifts toward the end of the chorus, where he's saying, "I must not remember," the meaning of it shifts from, "You think I must not remember all those things you did? Well, I do remember, and I must not remember what you did so that I can be a better man than you." That right there was just like a nail of like, hell yeah, man. You just nailed this sort of feeling that a lot of people have of, okay, you think you're going to get away with this, but I'm going to put this in a song and make you know that I have not forgotten, and I will not stoop to what you have done. I will break the curse, as so many people online would like to say. So, honestly, this song was going to be number one for me until second listen. I was like, like Near My God, just a little bit better. But, man, this track rules. I'm sorry. It's just a great track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think mentally I'm going to bump it up like a few notches, because even just think about the overall like enjoyment and the experience of the track for me as well. Like, it does deserve like maybe like just a slight hair up in the rating I have here. So the next track is Crown Candy, and Matt, the floor is yours.
Yes, Crown Candy. And this track I found out through the wonderful people at Genius.com that this is about a sort of late night soda shop, typical American diner type place in St. Louis, where Foxing is from and has sort of bonded together as. This track is another weird track that sort of has a biting tone about, just dealing with things, and, maybe this is where everything happens and we can, fall in love, but realistically that's not happening because we all have our own demons. And what really could have, the one part of this track I really did like was the weird call and response on the chorus, where the voices are just sort of singing this sort of weird, out of tune chorus, like a sort of like chanting monks on acid almost. I really dug that, honestly. I was like, okay, we're going with something here. And then the voice comes back and says, no, this is how we're going to do things. Did not crack my top three, but I respect it for what it did. Again, sort of creating this sort of antagonistic view of, trying to be the cool kid on a Saturday night and trying to, have the American graffiti lifestyle that comes from this sort of traditional diner type place, just being like, nah, this is not going to work.
So yeah, I did like the call and response dynamic in this track here that you mentioned. I thought that was a nice contrast, and just for me, the production here, I loved. You get that guitar, bass, and drum and piano. Just they're each doing kind of like crazy different lines, and I thought that was a excellent way to kick off the track here. And so earlier on in our review, I talked about discussions about religion and everything like that. And there's a moment here where Connor is talking about you're in Pascal's hell and you're still happy. And for those of you who are like, what's a Pascal's hell? So, this concept of Pascal's hell, it's based on a philosophical argument that French mathematician, philosopher, physicist, and theologian, last name Pascal. I'm not even going to pronounce that first name there because I'm not going to try to embarrass myself with it. But I think it's Blaise Pascal. But so this argument basically is talking about gambling whether or not to believe in God. So the concept is if God exists and you believe, you gain infinite gain, heaven. If God exists and you don't believe, you have the potential for infinite loss, hell, or at least eternal separation from God. If God doesn't exist and you believe, you essentially lose nothing. And if God doesn't exist and you don't believe, you essentially gain nothing. So it's better for you to, believe in God because, if you believe in God, if he doesn't exist, you essentially lose nothing. But if you don't believe in God, and if he does exist, you have the potential for infinite loss. So, talk about being in Pascal's hell. At this point, Connor is in a state where he's not believing in God, but somebody's saying hey, God does exist, so you're gonna go to hell. I mean, and for that to be contrasted with Connor talking about, hey, and you're still happy, that's an excellent turn of phrase for me, and that is only accompanied so well by the main hook on this track here being I'm wasting my life on you, that it's almost a contentious, rebellious statement against religion on its own right, but maybe not religion, but God as a figure. But yeah, overall though, I think that's the main thing that I really kind of got sucked into when looking into Crown Candy and experiencing it as a track. Because other than the call and response and the chorus being solid with the repetition of I'm wasting my life on you, there's not really a whole much else for me to really dig into. It's a great album track, not a good album track, a great album track, but not a highlight for me, if you know what I mean. I think I mainly got kind of sucked into that Pascal's wager argument more so than got sucked into the song.
I can understand that, because you're right. After you sort of dive into the importance of those lyrics, and then you dig the call response of the chorus, it really is just kind of an ordinary track with just some interesting ooh and ah, but not enough to pump it up to the top 3 for me. But it is a good track. I will say it is a good track. Maybe not a great track, but definitely has some great moments.
Yeah. So I'm ready to move on to the penultimate track on the record, Won't Drown If You Are.
I am.
Alright, so this song is really good. Just the way that the strings give way to the vocals and synths, coming out of the gate, out of the introduction, is a solid moment. The flow of the vocals here, I don't think I only talked about that in Grand Paradise, where just everything just flows together so well. Maybe and also Near My God, but more so in Grand Paradise. Just the way that everything kind of just flows together. It's so pleasing to my ears. And just the instrumentation is fantastic. Amazing drum lines. I love the strings, the guitar lines, they're all solid. And the chorus here pops more and more as the song progresses. And what really kind of just sold me on this track here was just the chorus being centered around this concept of bravery won't drown, so you keep the water running up. And let me check something here. Yeah, so you keep the water running. And just that the notion of bravery won't drown, so you keep the water running. It real like that has just been lodged into my brain over this past week since I've been dissecting this record here, and it's basically talking about like, hey, you might be going against like a whole lot of like struggles in your life. You No matter what you're going through, you have to put on a brave face. You have to take that action because as long as if you're taking that action, no matter how weak you feel, like you will always at least make it out on the other side for one way or another. And for that kind of motif, message, or idea to be presented in an album where you get songs like Five Cups and like countless amount of other songs where they're talking about like suicidal thoughts and like religion in its own right, like it's a very nice contrast. And like, yeah, I just, oh man, just, and also in the back half of the track here, you get lyrics of like, hold back your tears, wax the pain, pressure on the wound. And then also you get lyrics of hold back the blood flowing through your nose, pressure on the wound. So like you get the contrast of tears, blood, like just it's a very very pleasant experience for me. And this was a absolute surprise of a track for me in terms of like reviewing this record because yeah, I don't know if you were able to tell, but this is gonna finish out my top three on the album. Like, Won't Drown is an absolutely pleasant experience for me, head to toe. It is my third favorite track on the album.
It was a pleasant experience for me too. Not enough to get it into my top three, but I agree with you wholeheartedly that hook of bravery won't drown, so you keep the water running does hit very, very well. And I do appreciate you bringing up the fact that it contrasts the darker tone of a lot of the songs so well. My only problem is that that's all I get from this song is that hook. Like, I drive it and drive it. And we talk about it being repetitive. Like, here it works very well because that's kind of all you need. And the lyrics themselves are solid too. But it just didn't quite stand out for me as much as the other three did. Not as much as Bastardizer, not as much as Nearby God or Grand Paradise. But I would probably say it's the top half of the album. Probably, if I were to say, maybe like 5 or 6 out of 12. It's a really good, solid song, and I appreciate that it's in your top 3, and I respect that.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm glad that you at least did appreciate it. It's a very it's very much a foxing kind of track where it's a very unique experience, and I just appreciated what the track had to bring to the table. So, you ready to wrap up the album with the next track?
Yes, the last track, which is Lambert or Lambert, depending on which part of the world you were raised. And I do like how this song bookends the record in a very similar manner to Grand Paradise, where it starts with that hushed tone before it explodes into full band sound later on. And I do dig the lyrics at the start of, being, taking one step back from the wrong if I, go back to Lambert. But at the same time, the one thing that did kind of bring this track down a little bit for me, not so much that I have to put a negative connotation on it, is once again, the singing towards the end of the track when it goes to full band sound kind of didn't hit as well for me. It felt a little forced, especially compared to the singing at the start of the track, which I thought was actually really good, very similar to Bastardizer. And yeah, I think it's a really solid way to end the album. It's a solid album track. I wouldn't put it in the top half of the album, but I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I have a complicated relationship with this track here. Some of the thoughts you had, I kind of share with you, where in a concurred kind of way. I'm gonna start by saying I feel like the way that this track should have landed, where like what it was going for right out of the gate with more of that bleak, atmospheric kind of vibe, that probably should have been the way that it ended out because one of my main criticisms about the track here is you get that bleak kind of like atmospheric kind of vibe. Like I love the echoey guitar lines and that heartbeat drum effect kind of harkens back to the song Heartbeats, even though it was my least favorite track. I digress. The vocals here do sound really good, at least coming out of the gate. And then just after that second chorus, like you mentioned, like the band kind of riffs into like a higher tempo thing, but it only lasts for like a couple, like at most, like I didn't time it out like specifically, but it only lasts like maybe at most like 30 seconds, and like it just dies back down, and I'm left here wondering what was the point of that because like I do like the lyrics like I spent so long at the gates, heaven won't take me in, and wherever he's talking about, and I threw up so many times on the way, heaven won't take me in, heaven won't take me in. Like that's a great set of lyrics, but also like maybe that you could have saved that for like another song or maybe just save that for a future song. Like it almost feels like if you cut that out, maybe my experience with the track could have been a little bit better. And also I will say the notion of give back a note from the other one, take them all to go home, I have no idea what that means, and that's legitimately like three-fourths of the song lyrically. I'm gonna be genuine, like maybe a little bit overzealous with that statement, but they are writing that a little bit too hard. However, though, outside of those two criticisms, like again, the way that the track starts out with that echoey guitar line, the heartbeat drum effects, and the vocals sounding really good, like it had potential to wrap up the album in a very good fashion, but it kind of was, it's a hair of a miss, and honestly, this could have been like another bottom track for me. Probably just missed out on being like my second least favorite track, but it's still a good track in my own right, in my own opinion.
Yeah. Personally, I think it probably the entire theme of the record could have been elevated if you just switched out the last two tracks in order. Like if you put Lambert as the penultimate track and Woe Drown as the closer, I think that elevates this record just a little bit. Because to end on the vibes of Woe Drown, I think, would be very much appreciated considering the dark nature of this record. But they decided to go with Woe Drown before Lambert, and that's what they did. And Ryan, guess what we did?
We did it, man.
We did it. We got up on those horses and got near to God or something.
Oh yeah, man. So I'm gonna go first with my overall thoughts and ratings on this album here. So Near My God by Foxing, this group delivers quite the bleak album here. Like outside of like songs like Won't Drown, which is basically the only positive song on the album, I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. Like it's quite the depressive album. The lyric writing here is great, and the compositions are very solid. There are moments, though, where the band does kind of get lost in the sauce, and I can accuse them of navel gazing, where they ride choruses a little bit too much, and just they could have changed things up. And I knew that going into the review, but overall, though, I really enjoyed this album, and I have a lot of respect for this band as a whole. I'm going to stick with my original rating on Near My God by Foxing, and I'm going to give it a solid 8.5 out of 10.
Very nice, very nice. My thoughts on this record are a little different because I agree that there are a lot of arrangements on this track, on this album that are really, really good. Again, Doug, Grand Paradise, Doug, Bastardizer, Doug, Near My God, and even some of the other tracks that didn't land quite as high, like Trapped in Dillards or Crown Candy, or especially Five Cups. Again, most accurate song on the record, but because it's not a pleasant listen. I respect this band for what it's done. That being said, if I were to be completely honest, I could probably make a strong EP out of this album with the tracks that I like and not feel too bad about discarding the rest, because there is, to me, a few tracks on here like Game Shark, like Heartbeats, that really don't work very well. But honestly, considering the things that we've discussed, I'm going to bump my original rating up just a smidge. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10.
And, ladies and gentlemen, that equals out to a solid 8 out of 10. Because
math.
Because math. Math works, everyone. And when it comes to next album recommendations, for me, I'm just going to make it very easy on the listener here. I'm going to recommend the very next album that Foxing put out in 2021. And that album is Draw Down the Moon. In Draw Down the Moon, you get some of the more bleak tracks that you find in Nearer My God, but you also get bigger more so in that record, you get bigger production that you find in songs like Grand Paradise and Nearer My God itself. So they expand upon that sound while kind of trimming down on the bleak mushiness of songs like Five Cups and Lambert and a couple of the other tracks on the record. But yeah, easy recommendation for me. Draw Down the Moon by Foxing.
My pick for next album is going to be a little different because I really don't know if I can truly pick an album that sounds like this to recommend next. So I'm going to go with an album that made me feel similar after listening to it, with a bag of, oh, this is really good, mixed with, oh, I don't like this so much, mixed with, that's all right. And it's an album that we have reviewed on the show. It is an album called Because of the Times by Kings of Leon. Because that album very much made me feel the same way, where it was just starts great, kind of goes a little weird, has some good bits, had some bad bits, and it doesn't have that sort of same vibe of indie. Obviously, it sounds a little different because I feel like Foxing's a bit more of a sort of an artsier indie, whereas Kings of Leon is a bit more rootsier. But at the same time, you do have lyrics about personal life, dealing with the realities of the world around you, and that's the album that I thought of first when thinking about an album to recommend. So that is what I'm going with, Because of the Times by Kings of Leon.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've experienced, or, thanks to our review, you've experienced Nearer My God by Foxing, and if you're looking for a next album to check out based on our recommendations, check out Because of the Times by Kings of Leon and Draw Down the Moon by Foxing. So, yeah, I think that wraps up the review discussion as a whole. Only a couple more things to settle up. One, this is our last review of 2024, man. We have another calendar year under our belts, man. I feel pretty good about that. Well, it's our first full calendar year of reviews. We started in October of 2023, but it's been a full calendar year of reviews, man. I'm feeling very sentimental right now.
I'm right there with you, man. We have gone through quite a journey this year in our first full calendar year of Hey, Listen to This. We've gone through the highs of Bob Dylan to the lows of Pearl Jam. We discussed two out of the big three as far as pop acts this year in Sabrina Carpenter and Charlie XCX. We've discussed jazz, we've discussed country, we've discussed rap, we've discussed rock, we've discussed a bunch of different things. We've even gotten to dance techno a couple weeks ago with Sophie. So yeah, we have gone all across the map this year, and I've enjoyed pretty much every second of it, save for any technical difficulties that have gone through, but that's neither here nor there. We leave those off the record and off on the cutting room floor. But dude, I've had a great time this year, man.
So, that being said, Matt, where are we going next, man? What's going to be the very first review for us in 2025?
I've been thinking about this, and I've kind of thought, like, do I really want to, I mean, it'd be nice to have like a big splash of something, a big splash of a record to start 2025, but I honestly don't know what the exact pinpoint would be. So I'm just going to go with my original idea of copying off what you did this week by picking two albums by the same band, and I'm going to do the same thing. So we're going to be talking about one band, and I'm going to let you decide which album we're going to choose based off the years that they were released. Your choices are 1975 or 1977.
Oh, man. I feel like the last time the year 1975 was brought up as a choice, I picked it because of the band, the 1975. So I'm going to not do that. I'm going to do 1977 as my choice.
All right. So we are starting off with a rather popular, famous, occasionally infamous record. And that is by the band Steely Dan. And it is their landmark album from 1977 entitled Asia. So that is going to be our next topic of discussion, because I know we've talked in the past about Steely Dan, but we've never really gotten into a full dive of their album. So you ready for that one?
Oh man, yeah, I'm absolutely ready. This goes alongside of a couple of the other albums that we've explored, where I'm like, hey, I know the artist, never really got into them, so this will be an excellent diving point for me, man.
I'm very curious as to see what you go with here, because much like next week, we're going to be going into a band that has sort of is an interesting sound, and we'll get into it. But any further notes before we wrap up this discussion of Near My God by Foxing?
I mean, the only other note that I got to throw out there is for the listener out there who was expecting, us to cover a Christmas album around this time of the year, I'm going to be honest with you, nothing works like that.